Hi guys. So as we talked about in class today, we're going to be doing solving logarithmic equations. But as a pre-step, we'll need to condense the logs into a single log. So I have two examples for you because we've already kind of did a little bit of this during class, but I wanted to officially teach it to you. So here's our first example. Now again, in this problem, I have the word log written twice, which is telling me that I need to do a pre-step of condensing my logs into a single log. So anytime you see the log written more than once, you need to condense it first. In this problem, I do not have any numbers in front of my logs, so I will not be creating any exponents. My two logs are being subtracted, so that will turn into a division problem. Now, if you can, you are allowed to simplify your division problem. And if it turns into a multiplication problem, you should actually multiply it together to get a simpler version. So in this problem, I can simplify the 6 and the 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. In class, we were calling this the condensed form. Once you have it in the condensed form, then you can wheel it out and change it to exponential form. Notice on this step that I put a little 10 underneath the log so that it would be easier for me to do the wheel. When I do the wheel, I will get 10 to the power of negative 2 equals 2 over x. Now we're working in the territory from prior to spring break. So before spring break, we did problems like this. And I talked to you about after you do the wheel, the first thing you need to do next is figure out what does your exponent turn into. So when we have a negative exponent, it's going to turn into a fraction. So instead of 10 to the power, it'll become 1 over 10 to the power. And then 10 squared is 100. So the negative makes it a fraction, and then the 2 makes it a 100. Next, since I have a fraction equal to a fraction, I am going to cross multiply. So I will multiply the x times the 1 and the 100 times the 2. And once I do that, I'm done, because now my x is by itself. So the answer to this problem is x equals 200. Let's try one more just to make sure that we're feeling good about this. So here is our last example for this video. In this example, just like in the last one, I do have two words log. So I will need to condense that into a single word log. For my first log, the parentheses means that the entire subtraction problem is part of the log. So I am taking the log of the x minus 3. Since this one is addition, I will be changing this to multiplication, and I will be multiplying the x minus 3 with the x. Now I decided to put the x first because that just looks a little bit more normal to me and more what I'm used to. I do want to actually do this multiplication problem, so I will be taking this x and distributing it to the x and the 3. And so then I get x squared minus 3x. Notice that I kept the subtraction problem in a parentheses. That way that I remember that this whole thing is part of the log. I am taking the log of the x squared minus 3x. So make sure to keep those parentheses around the subtraction problem. I put my little 10 underneath the log because now I'm ready to do the wheel and change it to exponential form. When I change it to exponential form, it will turn into 10 to the power of 1 equals the subtraction problem, the x squared minus 3x. Now 10 to the power of 1, that's just 10, so I'm just going to make it a 10. In this problem, I have an x squared. If you have an equation with an x squared, you should set it equal to 0 and factor. So we made a factoring book first semester. If you need to refresh your memory on how to factor, I subtracted the 10 to the other side, and that's how I got it equal to 0. This is a trinomial, so I'm going to factor by doing x box. I need to think of two numbers that will multiply to make negative 10, and then we'll add to make negative 3. And those two numbers are negative 5 and positive 2. Once we're done factoring, we take each individual parentheses and we set them each equal to 0, and we solve them separately, and we get two answers. If a problem has an x squared in it, you should expect to get two answers. The two answers that I got for this problem are x equals 5 and x equals -2. Now, we haven't really talked about this yet because it hasn't really happened yet, so you didn't need to know. But you can only take the log of a positive number. You cannot take a log of a negative number. Remember that when you're taking a log, you're finding the answer to an exponent problem. And you can't get a negative answer to an exponent problem. If you raise a positive number to a power, you're always going to get a positive answer. So anytime that you get a negative answer for your x, you should always be a little cautious, and you should check and see if it actually works. So I wrote this down, and I already said this out loud, but if you want to write it in your notes, you can. You can only take the log of a positive number. So if you get an answer that's a negative, you should definitely plug it back in to make sure that you are taking the log of a positive number. Sometimes when you plug a negative number back in, it will turn into a positive number. For instance, if the problem was x plus 5 and I have the -2, right? -2 plus 5, that's +3. That works. But sometimes it doesn't work. When we're plugging it back in, specifically, we're plugging it back into the logs in the original question. And you're really just checking to see, does the part next to the log stay positive or turn negative? So when I plug in the 5, it works out okay. 5 minus 3 is +2. That's good. And the log of 5, well, 5 is positive. That's good. So when I plug in the 5, it's fine. And everything we've done so far would have worked out fine. This is our first example of one where it doesn't work out. And so when I plug in the -2, -2 minus 3, that's -5. And you cannot take the log of -5. You can even try it on your calculator, right? Because this is a log base 10. So you can type in log of -5 equals, and it says that it has a domain error, which basically means you can't take the log of a negative. We also run into an issue on the second log because it literally is just log of -2. So what that means is that -2 is an extraneous solution. We've talked about this in previous chapters, an answer that you think is an answer, but after you plug it in, it's not really an answer. And so the only answer for this problem would be the number 5. So on tonight's homework, when you're doing the problems, if you end up with a square, you might want to check and see your answers. And if you plug it back in and it turns into a negative, then it's not really an answer. But if you plug it back in and it's still positive, then you're good to go. This is the end of today's video.